Hello, lovely people. Grab your popcorn, grab a cuppa, grab a beer or whatever you're drinking, and let's do this. But before that, I would like to thank a few people for supplying these drivers for the test. So first of all, Richard, then Frank from Heppa King, Gitas from Audio Status, Am from Blade Ice, and Peter from PS Sound. Thank you very much, guys. It's highly appreciated, and I think the car audio community is going to be grateful for that. Before I share all the results, I want to make a disclaimer that was pointed out to me by a few people after I published the video about the impedance graphs and everything, is that these drivers, not just very few of them are actually car audio drivers, and all the other drivers are very, very different drivers. So we have to be very careful when evaluating them because every driver is made for a specific purpose. For example, I had a comment under one of my videos from Cartesian, which you remember this French brand, and they specifically told me that this driver is, and I'm going to read the actual comment that they posted under my video. It isn't a mid-range, but a wideband dedicated to pro audio ultra compact line array. So that's the thing. Every driver is slightly different. And what I'm trying to do is I'm kind of trying to put everything under one umbrella and choose the best one. But it's not fair. However, we're still going to be doing this because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to find the best performing driver in different areas that would be suitable for a typical car audio installation, which would be either in A pillars, either in the dash. And we're looking for a driver for a three-way, which would act as a mid-range or as a wideband. So I have loads of different measurements. We're gonna go through what we're gonna check. We're gonna check the frequency response. We're gonna check on axis frequency response, off axis frequency response, near field frequency response. Then we're gonna have a look at the distortion, impulse, waterfall, and some other stuff that I already measured. So before we do that, I think it's very important for us, again, this is my table, is to know what kind of drivers are we working with. So this column will tell you if this driver is a mid-range, like a dedicated mid-range, or a wideband. And I'm going to repeat myself again. This red and green stuff that I put it is just for me to know which drivers are slightly better than others or slightly worse than others. Now, it doesn't mean that if a driver has a lot of red, it doesn't mean that it's a bad driver. It just means that this driver, for my specific purpose that I'm testing, is not ideal. For a different purpose, it would be much better and that kind of stuff. So bear in mind that. From all of these drivers, we have quite a few mid-ranges and quite a few widebands. I did this in a way, I'm going to show you how. This is on-axis frequency response of all the drivers. And my criteria for a driver to be wideband is for it to play all the way up until we hear it. So my criteria is not 20K. My criteria is going to be about 16K because I personally hear up to 16K and I don't want like any kind of 3-inch to play higher than that. It can play, but I think 16K is a good cutoff point to say that a driver is a wideband. So if we're gonna have a look, I think this is the best way to show you. I'm not sure if it's gonna be very visible through a video, but for me, it's very good to compare like the drivers against each other. So for example, if I highlighted this, you can see that this is a Chinese high fine. It goes all the way up 16 and it has a rising edge. Then we have this one, wideband. This one is a mid-range. So RF 30M, which is this one, I put it as a mid-range because according to this, to me, it plays up to what? Well, 13, 14K. It could be pushed probably up to to be a wideband, but I would say it's a mid-range because it doesn't play all the way up. And from all of these, you can see a wideband, this is a mid-range as well, high fine. Brax is a mid-range, it's not a wideband because you can see after 10K, it drops down the on-axis frequency response, so it doesn't play all the way up, and it is advertised as a mid-range. One audio, wideband, La Voce, wideband, Illusion Audio. So this is a new one that I didn't introduce in the previous videos because I literally received it last week. So the videos were already done. So it's a newcomer to the bunch. I will do a full review of the whole three-way set. So this is Illusion Audio Carbon 3 C3. It is a wideband. Dayton ND, it plays all the way, but it has a drop. However, this one, it's not really a wideband, so it is kind of a more like a mid-range. SB Acoustics, wideband, all the Fatal Pros, we know they're widebands, they play all the way up. Stag MSS3, this is kind of debatable. It doesn't reach 16, but it goes all the way up to 15, so it's kind of a wideband, I want to say. Fatal Pro, another one. ScanSpeak, very flat wideband. Sound Hits wideband. I just want to show you like the on-axis frequency response. So this one, the Fostex, it is kind of a wideband, but it drops off after like 12K or so. So it's debatable if it's a wideband or a mid-range, but probably just a mid-range. Peerless Dome mid-range, it has issues after 8K, so it is a mid-range, it's not a wideband. MS30 wideband, My Status wideband. This is a Chinese dome, which plays kind of all the way up, but it is a mid-range. It's a dome mid-range, so yeah. Cartesian wideband, Alpine. This Alpine, it does drop off quite gradually, 30 MC, so I'm gonna call it as a mid-range, not a wideband. Dayton RS75 wideband, and I just took Brax 2 times. I'm gonna tell you why. So mid-range, 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 and all the rest are wideband. Now, the other thing that is very easy to check is the sensitivity of the driver. So I did check the sensitivity playing 2.83 volts because some drivers are 8 ohms, some of them are 6 ohms. However, I compared all of them under the same voltage just to see how they do. And I highlighted kind of the best performers are the worst. So from this, you can see that the lowest sensitivity is this Dayton ND94, which is kind of expected because it's kind of a mini subwoofer. We know that. Then the other one is Illusion Audio, surprisingly, only 82 decibels. Then we have Dayton PS95, just because it is an 8 ohm driver, so it does have a lower sensitivity. You kind of expect it. Then Sound Hits, one of the Chinese driver, 85, and SB10, Acoustics SB10, 84 decibels, so it's kind of low. On the other side of the spectrum, the high sensitivity drivers are obviously the Fatal Pros. So Fatal Pro, this one is a bit less, 91, but the older one, the big magnet one, you can see 95. This one, 93. La Voce, 92, quite high, but not as high as the others. One Audio, 94.5. Super sensitive, super loud. Then one of the Chinese drivers is very sensitive. And again, the Fatal Pro 4-inch, 93 dB. All the others, you can see it fits about 90, 91, some 88. Brax, for example, 88, a bit lower. But the rest is about 90, some less, some more. So this is the sensitivity. Then the other thing is the lowest crossover that I determined based on the distortion measurements. So let me very quickly show you just a few. Let's take, for example, One Audio. I think it's a good example. So I determined that a good crossover for this driver is 250 Hertz. All of these frequencies is in 24 dB per octave Linkwitz-Riley. So 250 gives me a distortion curve that doesn't rise at the bottom end. If I would put 200, this portion, about 300 Hertz, would rise up close to like 1% or so. If I keep lowering the crossover frequency, I will have more and more distortion. So I kind of eyeballed it and made sure that distortion is not rising, and it's like on the level of the rest of the driver, or lower than that. If you're gonna put like 400, obviously this is gonna fall down, but in general, these are the frequencies that I came up with based on the distortion. And from this, we can see that some of these drivers can be crossed very low, and some of them need quite high crossover. So for example, this Peerless Dome midrange, if you remember, it needs a 500 hertz crossover, which is kind of expected. The other dome, the Chinese dome, plays down to 350, nice. However, it doesn't have the response there, but you can cross it at 350 and the distortion is not rising, so that's fine. Then from all others, Fostex, it needs a 350 just because it has very little X-max, so it doesn't have a lot of excursion, and it just needs a higher crossover. The other one is one of the Chinese, Hi-Fine 3-inch. It needs a 350 as well because I don't know, a high Q of this driver, and it just has a lot of distortion at the bottom end. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, which are the drivers that can be crossed very low? And this is kind of debatable again, because this was pointed out to me by Gitis as well. He said that like low crossover point for a mid-range driver is not necessarily a very desirable thing, especially if you have a typical system where you have your mid bass in the doors, you can cross them higher. So if you can cross a mid-range 300, 400 hertz, it's totally fine. But in my system, since I have my mid bass in the kicks, I need the mid-range to play as low as possible. So for me personally, a low crossover point is desirable for a mid-range. So from these, the surprising one, for example, is this Cartesian. It's one of the smallest drivers, but is doing fine with a 200 hertz crossover. Surprise, surprise. Fatal Pros, both of them, the 3.5 inch, 200. SB10, SB Acoustics, 200 as well. Brax, you could do 200, but 220, 250 is better. So this one. What else? Dayton ND94, which is mini subwoofer, 200 because it has a lot of excursion. Stegem SS3, it is a big driver, 4-inch, so you can cross it quite low. Now, surprising thing is the scan speed. This was kind of an anomaly, and I did tested it a few different times on different days because this seemed weird to me. So let me show you. If I'm gonna find it, scan speak. So this is the distortion with 150 hertz crossover, which is crossed here. If I'm increasing the crossover up to like 200, 250, nothing really changes. Just this area between 2 and 300 just falls down. But these two peaks, they kind of stay in the same place. If I keep lowering down to like 100 hertz, then this rises up. So I don't know how they did that, but surprise, surprise, the scan can be crossed at 150 with no major distortion issues. So this is amazing, I want to say. And all the other ones, like 250 and 300, on average, I have 250 to 270, 300 hertz as a normal typical crossover for all of these drivers. So again, these are just the lowest and highest crossovers. Now, if we started talking about like distortion and crossovers, let's jump to the distortion section. So this is like an overlay of all the drivers' distortion. I kind of zoomed in from 150 hertz up to 12K because there's nothing above 12K, and below 150 it doesn't really matter. And the Y scale is zoomed in as well. It goes up to 20% because if I'm going to increase it up to like 100, it squashes the scale, so it's difficult to see the difference. So let's keep it at 20. So it is very, very zoomed in. And here we can have a look at how different drivers perform. I don't know, again, if it's going to be very visible for you, but for me, it's very good to see it like this. So you can see like compared to all the other drivers, because you have like this between 2% and 0.1, everything basically fits. So I did highlighted a few that are red and that are green, but I think for distortion, it's worthwhile to go through each driver individually and just to have a look. So I'm going to draw a line at 0.5%. I'm going to be very, very harsh, and I'm going to say that 0.5% is my limit that differentiates a good distortion and bad distortion. Now at 90 dB, if you take in two drivers, 96 decibels, probably 1% would be a better, or even higher than that would be a better value. But for me, it's just to differentiate best performers from slightly worse performers. So let's go one by one. Chinese, Hi-Fine. It's not bad. Like you can see a peak at 700 Hz, and then you can see a rising distortion from about 2K all the way up. But majority of the response is at about 0.5%. So this is surprising because I didn't expect any of the Chinese drivers to be clean at all, and I was expecting that they're gonna have the worst distortion from all of the drivers, but it's not the case. So this is not bad. You can see that 700 goes all the way up to 2%, which is not nice, but it's not bad. The Chinese, mid 3.5, this is not bad at all. About 1%, and then after 1K, it drops below 0.5%, 0.2%. So this is very good performance. Another Chinese driver, RF M30, again, very similar to Hi-Fine. It just has a rising distortion profile. And again, below everything below 1%, apart from the very, very top end. Not bad. The Chinese driver, very similar. These are almost identical, very, very similar, both of these Chinese drivers. Another Chinese driver, again, very, very similar, everything below 1%, but it doesn't kind of qualify for me that everything would be below 0.5%. Now, Brax. Okay, so I will spend a bit more time on Brax because when I measured this and I saw this, everything is above 0.5%. And I was like, it cannot be like that. So what I did is, because I have a pair of Brax drivers, I have two of them. So what I did, I measured the second one that is not broken in. This driver is broken in, and I measured the second one, which is this one, that is not broken in. And you can see for this one, the distortion is much lower. At the lower frequencies, it still reaches some places like 1%, but after like 550 Hertz, it drops down. And then all the way up to 2.5K, it's very good distortion. So since this is a mid-range driver, not a wideband, everything like above 3K, I want to say, can be ignored. And everything between, I want to say, 560 Hertz all the way up to 2K is super, super clean. You can see it's like, let me actually undo this. You can see it here, 0.3%. It's super, super clean because this can be ignored. And this is just, it is what it is. But it's good. It's very, very good. So for the Brax, because that one, the first Brax that I measured, I don't know why it had slightly worse measurements like this. You can see there's a big difference between these two drivers. I don't know why it is, but it's good that I had two. So I did check both of them, and the second one has much lower distortion. Okay, next after Brax is One Audio. One Audio has very good distortion measurements. Everything is below 0.5%, you can see, apart from that little peak at 2.5K, but everything else is 0.5% or low. So this is very, very good. So I did put it as green here in the distortion, One Audio green. Then La Voce. La Voce, slightly higher distortion and lower frequencies, between 400 and about 800, but still below 1%, which is not bad. Everything else is 0.5% or lower. Very, very good. Illusion Audio has these very weird peaks at, what, 420 and 500 Hertz, and 320 as well. I don't know why. I did measure it a few times, but it still had the same results, and you can see everything is 0.5% or above. So to me, it doesn't classify as like green. So it's not red, but it's not green as well. And again, this is just comparing against all the other drivers. The Dayton ND94, the mini subwoofer, you can see it has probably the highest distortion from all the drivers. And it's not surprising. It's not meant to be like proper SQ drivers, so it's not surprising. 1.5% all the way through. There's a peak at 420 Hertz. You can see it goes all the way up to like 4.5% or something. Yeah, quite a high distortion for this driver. SB10, surprisingly, I was expecting a bit better numbers, but it's not bad. Everything is like 0.7, 0.6%, which is below 1%. with a higher crossover, this is crossed at 200 hertz, and you can see there is a slight peak of distortion, like between 180 and 280 and 300 hertz. So if you would cross it at maybe like 250 or 300, that peak would go away. However, everything, as you can see, stays about 0.6, 0.7, so slightly higher than my 0.5% target. Fatal Pro 3FE22, which is the newer one, very good numbers, very good performance, apart from, again, the lower end between 300 and 500 hertz. FE25, this is the legendary one. Again, amazing. For a driver that costs like 15 pounds, $20 or something, it's amazing. Everything below 1%, you can see there's like a mountain between 250 and 800 hertz, but especially at the higher frequencies, very good performance. Steg MSS3, everything below 0.5%, which is amazing. You can see the distortion starts to rise above 3 kilohertz and goes up, and at like 10 kilohertz you have like 10%. But this driver, again, is not really a wideband because it's a big massive driver. So if you use it as a mid-range up to 2K, maybe 4K, it's very good. Very good numbers, below 0.5%. The Fatal Pro 4FE42. This was the most surprising part for me. This driver has the lowest distortion of all the drivers. You can see 0.2% and lower. I never expected that for a driver costing 30 pounds to have such low distortion, but there you go. This is the cleanest driver of all of them. Probably the second in place is going to be ScanSpeak. They're very close to each other. However, ScanSpeak, you can see, slightly higher. Everything below 0.5%, about 0.3% or something, if you would average that out. There are a few of these little peaks at like 320 hertz and 420 hertz, but it's nothing to be concerned. One of the Chinese sound hits. This is the cheapest driver, which costs like 7 or 8 pounds. And you can see the distortion is very good. Everything below 1%, 0.6, 0.7% at lower frequencies. After 1K, it drops down to 0.2 and below. Amazing performance. For the price, this is amazing distortion performance. Dayton PS95, again, at lower frequencies, you can see it has very low distortion. Like between 250 hertz and all the way up to 1K. Everything below 0.5%. Low, very low distortion. There is a slight rise all the way up to 2K. After that, again, it drops. So this Dayton, very good distortion performance. Fostex as well, very good performance. There is a peak you can see at about 1.8 kilohertz. There's a massive peak all the way up to 2%. And we're going to see that that peak kind of corresponds with a dip in the frequency response. So it is something to do with the actual driver, maybe with a surround or a cone, but it's a driver issue. But all the other frequencies, again, very good. 0.5% or below. The Peerless Dome, surprisingly, very good distortion. Even if you cross it at 500, which is quite high, you still have those two little peaks at 500 and 600 hertz. However, below that, it does roll off, so it doesn't have the response like at 300 hertz. So that's why the distortion is very low. It does have a rising distortion profile, which at like 5K, you can see it's all the way up to 5%. But again, it's a mid-range. It's not going to be a wideband, so it's going to be crossed, and that all of that top end is going to go away. So for a driver costing, I think I saw it for 7 pounds, it's very good. Very good numbers. The only limitation is going to be frequency response, and we're going to be talking about that later. Stag MSS 30, slightly higher distortion than compared to the others, especially between 400 and 700 hertz, all the way up to 1%, slightly more. So it's not a disaster, but slightly higher than others. This can be used as a wideband, so you can see from 800 hertz and all the way up, very low distortion at higher frequencies, which is very nice to see. My status, Again, not bad. Almost everything is below 0.5%, apart from that peak at like 500 hertz and 320 hertz. But all the other frequencies are very nice. I did measure this driver before, so I knew what to expect. The dome, 5 to 8, the Chinese dome, one of the worst. You can see the distortion. 1.5%, between 400 and all the way up to like 1.5K. Yeah, it has a lot of distortion. This driver is one of the dirtiest. Again, 1.5% at 90 dB. It's not that bad, but relatively compared to other drivers, it's quite a lot. Cartesian, this is bad. You can see 2%, 2.5%, probably up to 3% in the actual mid-range where this driver is supposed to shine, and it doesn't. If you want to reduce that distortion, you would have to cross it probably like 600 hertz just to remove that bottom end. But I try to this is with 200 hertz crossover only. I tried 300, 350, I tried 400. It doesn't really do anything because you can see the distortion is the highest is at 700 hertz. So the crossover doesn't take it away, which is kind of sad. But again, it's a very small driver. It's one of the smallest drivers. So playing it at 90 dB, it's kind of pushing it. Now, Alpine 30MC. Again, it's not bad. Everything below 1%, but on average, it's slightly higher than all the rest. So I cannot give this driver a green light because everything is above 0.5%, but lower than 1%. So it's not bad, but relatively not as good. RS75 Dayton, the small 2-inch. I don't know what's happening in the higher frequencies. I did measure it again a few different times. Maybe it's some kind of a breakup or something. You can see a 7.5 kilohertz. The distortion peak goes all the way up to 20K. I don't know why that is. There's another peak at 2.5K. But if you're going to use it as a mid-range, not as a wideband, and you're going to cross it like 2.5, 3K, it's not bad. Everything is kind of below 1%. It's not bad, but I don't know what's happening at the top end. It doesn't look really, really good. And there's Brax, as I mentioned, which is not the best, but not bad at all. So from all of these, again, I gave these Alpine 30MC as a red, because again, it's not bad, but not great as well. The Cartesian, because it has the highest distortion of them all. The Dayton ND94, because again, it has the highest distortion. And that little Chinese dome that has high. So these got red. And the green ones, obviously, all of them are not bad, but I picked the ones with the lowest distortion. So the lowest one is the Fatal Pro 4FE42, which has the lowest of them all. Then the second place would be ScanSpeak, One Audio, Fostex, as I mentioned, the Dayton PS95, which has a lower distortion, especially lower frequencies, Steg MSS3, especially if you use it as a mid-range and not a full range, not a wideband, because it is a mid, so very good, and the Peerless Dome, that surprisingly has very low distortion. So these are distortion ones. Now, the other thing that I checked is the impulse. So if you go here in the impulse overlay, so this is obviously, it's a mess because we're gonna have to go one by one through everything. Let me show you a few different ones based on which I gave green or red. So the impulse response, basically what it shows you the cone movement and how quickly it settles into place. Ideally, you would want something like this, which you have one peak up, one peak down, and then settles and nothing else. So this Fostex driver, it has probably the best impulse response from all the other drivers. Now, why it is? Probably because it has a very, very light cone, so light moving mass. It has very little X-max, so it doesn't go far up and down. And I guess it has a strong motor force, strong motor. So you can see this is, it's almost ideal. 1, 2, and that's it. On the other side of the spectrum is my Alpine status. And you can see, instead of going up and down, the driver is like, it doesn't settle at all. So this impulse, in my opinion, it will translate into maybe attack or something like this. Because if you imagine a driver that just hits a note, just kicks and stops, it feels very sharp. And when you have something like this, it kind of stretched out over time, you have kind of a lingering notes. So maybe they're not as precise. It might be that this would sound, I don't want to use on any audiophilic terms because probably I'm going to be corrected in the comments because I'm not sure about this. Maybe something like woolly or something like warm when you have maybe extended notes, maybe more pleasant. And this would sound extremely accurate and sharp. And again, I guess whichever prefers. So let's have a look at these. Chinese high fine. Not great. Another Chinese, better, but not great as well. This is, again, it's not that bad. Another Chinese, not that bad. This is quite good, I want to say. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it. This one is slightly worse. It has much longer ringing. The Brax, very good. 1, 2, and just a little bit. But if you compare it to the one that I showed you, the best one, the Fostex, it's not far from it. Don't look at the phase, don't look at the time, because it's a USB microphone, nothing is aligned. But just for reference, it's good. The other Brax that I took, slightly better. Like this. 1, 2, and settles. So Brax is a very, very accurate driver. After that, One Audio, again, very, very good. 1, 2, 3, and then settles. One Audio is very nice. La Voce, same. 1, 2, 3, settles. Very good. Illusion Audio, again, great. Dayton ND94. For some reason, it's good. It does have a big surround, a heavy cone and everything, but the impulse is great. 1, 2, and stop. Amazing. SB10, slightly worse. Not as good as it could be, so it does linger a little bit. Fatal Pros, as we expect, since they're like very light cone Pro Audio mid-ranges, they do settle very fast, so the impulse is short. Both of them. The 22 is slightly better than the 25. 25 lingers a bit longer, but it's not as bad. MSS3, not bad. I don't know what this is because this is slightly after the actual impulse. So the impulse 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this, I don't know what it is. Other Fatal Pro, very good as well. Not as great, but not bad. Scan Speak, amazing. 1, 2, 3, and stop. Literally stop. Very good. Sound Hits, yeah, this is, it's ringing like a bell. What do you expect from a 7-pound driver? It's the cheapest driver from the bunch. Dayton PS95, again, has some ringing, which is more compared to the others. The Fostex, as I mentioned, the best one. 1, 2, that's it. Nothing else. This is the best example of the impulse response that I have from the bunch. Peerless Dome, I don't know what's happening here, but to me it's quite long, the impulse. So yeah, and it's not nice. Steg MS30, it is a long impulse, similar to my Status. Where is it? Yeah, very similar to the Status. Status is a bit longer, but this one is long as well. So it's not as snappy. I don't know. The other Dome, surprisingly, probably as good as the Fostex. 1, 2, and that's it. Just because that Dome has literally no X-Max, and the actual dome is probably a silk or something, so very, very light. So yeah, impulse is amazing on this one as well. Very, very snappy. Cartesian, quite long, not as great, similar to the Status. Alpine 30MC, surprisingly very good as well. 1, 2, and stop. All the other measurements for this driver, they're not as great, but the impulse is very good, surprisingly. RS75, the small little baby, It is quite long. It extends quite long. And as I mentioned, brags 1, 2, and stop. So from all of these, Cartesian I picked as on the bottom of the list for the impulse performance. Then Steg MS30 rings quite a lot. And my status driver. Yeah, it's not great. From all the good ones, surprisingly Alpine 30MC. Then we have the Fatal Pro, all the basically all the high sensitivity drivers that I would imagine have very low moving mass. So Fatal Pro, La Voce, One Audio, Brax, Scan, Fostex, and these Dome and Illusion Audio. So yeah, and all the others, they're not bad, but compared to others are worse, and compared to red, better. So again, I'm going to repeat myself. Red and green doesn't mean that it's a good or a bad driver. It just means that from this sample of 26 drivers that I have is better or worse than the average. And now we can go to the actual frequency response. Now with the frequency response, it's slightly interesting because if you think about it, since we're using these drivers in cars in highly reflective environments, the actual linearity of the frequency response is not that important. Obviously, if you have a linear frequency response, it just indicates that the driver is well done, well made. However, if you have some peaks and dips, it's not a disaster because we are fighting with reflections anyway, and we're using EQ to fix those problems. So all the wideband drivers, they will have cone breakup somewhere here, like between 1020 or even lower, just because those cone breakups help to extend the frequency response all the way up to 20K. So it is expected. However, everything like I want to say 1K and below, we want to see as linear as possible because that is the proper mid-range. So again, we're gonna go one by one and just to see how things are. Now for this, I think it's very useful to have a look at the near field response rather than far field, because far field and near field, you can see this is the gated far field from 1 meter. This is obviously the baffle, and all the other stuff kind of matches what we see in the near field response. However, the near field is a bit more detail and is telling us a bit more compared to this. So the far field, I'm going to be using only for the on-off axis and the distortion and the impulse. But for the actual frequency response, I will be checking the near field response. You can disagree with me. Feel free to do that, but I will be looking at the linearity of the near field response. So this one is one of the Chinese Hi-Fi 3-inch, and this is an example of one of the worst frequency responses that I have in this bunch. From this we can see that this is a high Q driver. Let's have a look how high it is. Hi-Fi 3-in, which is this one, number 17. You can see the Q is 2. So yeah, that's why you have this peak. And again, the lower extension, this, again, it doesn't really matter. It's interesting to have a look to see, but it doesn't matter because we will be crossing this driver, all of them, about 250 hertz. So all of this is gonna go down. So it doesn't really matter, but it's just interesting to see how it is. However, for this, we see all of these nastiness, and it's really, really nasty. Okay, we can forgive like this, all the top end above 6K, which is the cone breakup and everything. But here at 1.2, here at 2.2, and here, it's nasty. It's not good. Next in line, mid 3.5 Chinese. This is, you can see the Q is 0.7, so it doesn't kind of a normal roll off. However, it's far from being linear at all. You can see it's rising, it has a bit of a peak, down, and this is the cone breakup. So this is not great as well. Another Chinese, this is much, much nicer. You can see the cone behaves very nicely all the way up to 4K, and then there's something happening here, and then it blah, 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 blah. So if you would use it as a mid-range, crossed at about 2K or 3, 2.5 or 3K, it's perfectly fine. All of this is not ruler flat, but it's good. It's very good to see. However, this, we will see actually this dip and all the other stuff in all more expensive drivers as well. So don't be surprised. But this is, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. The other Chinese looks much better. We have a little wiggle here. We have a little here, then it goes down, but it is much more linear. There's one cone breakup and then it kind of goes down, which is not that bad. This is much better. The QT C830. Now, the other Chinese driver, this, again, not that bad, all the way up to 3K, almost linear, and then stuff happening here. Now, Brax, again, very similar if you saw with this one of the Chinese. They're almost identical. We have something happening here, something happening here, then a little drop, and the Chinese one goes up because that is almost a wideband, but the Brax is a mid-range, so it does fall down at the bottom end. I have the other Brax as well, not break it in, so the orange one is broken in and the blue one is brand new. So we have some differences here, which is not big differences, but the biggest difference is at the bottom end. You can see that the driver that is broken in, it has lower FS and it plays lower and has more here. So this is the effect of breaking in a driver. But Brax, you can see it's not ruler flat, but it's not bad as well. Now the next one audio. So if you remember, when I did the impedance stuff, for the one audio, I gave red one for linearity of the impedance graph. And this is the frequency response. And just to remind you, I pulled the actual impedance graph, and we can see these peaks, as I mentioned, 1.1K, 1.1K, 2.4K, 2.4K, 16K, 16K something here. So you can see that, and as I mentioned, that linearity of the impedance plot kind of tells us how the driver is made. So you can see these little something, but it's not bad at all because it's not a massive hole. It's not nothing. You have only what, 4 decibels drop, which is, in my personal opinion, it's good. It's not bad at all. Even if it's not super linear, the driver behaves very nicely all the way up to like 8K. We're gonna see this in a few different drivers as well, as I mentioned, because this is about 1.5K or something. It's the surround that is kind of out of phase with the cone. But yeah, this little hole, it's not that bad. It's not an issue. So the response itself, it looks not good, but it's good. It's just my subjective opinion. Now, La Voce. This is amazing. We have extremely flat response all the way up to 7K or something, then it slightly rises up. Something happening here above 11K on the top, but this bottom end is very flat. This, again, same as in one audio we saw, just slightly lower. This is a bit higher, but exactly the same. This is very nice response. Illusion Audio, weird. All I can say is just weird. It looks like it has a slightly higher Q. I didn't measure the impedance of this one, so I'm not sure about the Q of the driver. But this looks kind of similar to Brax, where you have this little kind of shelf drops off. Just on the Illusion, it's much more pronounced. And again, if you're going to use this as a dedicated mid-range and you're going to cross it quite low, it needs to be crossed low for this to go away. This area is very nice. You can see like between 1K and 2K, there's nothing. Like if you saw on the, even on the La Voce, we have this here. On one audio, you have this here. This Illusion driver doesn't have anything. So everything like below 2.7K, it's not flat, but it's very linear, if you know what I mean. And this little dip, it shows up even on far field. So you can see on far field response, it has this nasty dip. So it's not nice, but lower mid-range is very good. Now, Dayton, the mini subwoofer. Yeah, it's not bad. It doesn't have any major issues all the way up to like 5K, I want to say. We have something here happening, but it's not as bad. Then it just drops off because, again, it's a mid-range. It's not a wideband, but not bad at all. SB10, again, very, very flat. All the way up to like 1.7, it's ruler flat. This is one of the flattest responses from all the drivers. And then a little hump, a little valley, and it plays nicely all the way up to like 9K or so, which, because these are not major issues, it's not like a massive hole or peak. It's like plus minus 2, 3 dB, which is very, very nice. So it is linear. It is very nice. Here we have probably a cone breakup and something going down because it does play all the way to 20K. Fatal Pros. Yeah, Fatal Pros are not nice. And we know that even from the factory datasheet that Fatal Pro provides, they have exactly the same dip in here and exactly, not exactly, but very, very similar dips in all the responses. So the F22 and F25, very similar. On the 25 is a very slightly lower, very similar to the one audio, you can see, just different frequency, but very, very similar. But these, the Fatal Pros don't have the flattest frequency response, but it's not bad. It has some wiggles, but it looks like it's controlled because you see it doesn't have this massive peak like the SB has this massive peak. This one doesn't have it. It's much flatter. So even if it's not like totally flat, it's nice. It's very good. Exactly the same for the 25. Again, very, very nice. Steg MSS3, again, it's a mid-range, so you wouldn't want to play it all the way up. And we see exactly the same as we saw with one of these Chinese drivers. You can see this one has a bit higher in frequency, and the Steg MSS3 has lower. So again, all the way up to 3K, very, very nice. No issues here between 1 and 2K with the surround, very nice to see. And again, if you cross it as a mid-range at 3K, all of this goes in the crossover and everything is very, very nice. Very nice response from this Steg. Another Fatal Pro, this is nasty. This looks kind of nasty, but again, it's not as bad because if you think about it, it is a 4-inch, so similar to the MSS3, and you can see it's kind of almost following each other. Same dip here, same peak, same dip, same this. Just the Fatal Pro plays higher because it is kind of a full range driver, and the MSS3 kind of rolls off a little bit. So if you're comparing these, because they're both of them are the same size, so you can kind of directly compare them. Steg plays lower, it has a bit more bottom end, but the rest of the response is kind of the same. So not bad for the Fatal Pro. And again, plus minus 5 dB, apart from like this dip and this dip, it's not bad. All the way up to 3K, 2.8K. Now this one, Scan 10F. Like, man, this is, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's almost perfection. You have all the way up to 8K, totally flat. A little peak here, little tiny peak, a little roll off, but this is the best looking frequency response from all the drivers, the most linear. Even if you take the SB10, which is kind of flat-ish, the SB10 you can see from like 1.6, it has something happening here at the top, but the scan speak, you can tell that this driver is extremely good engineered, totally flat. Something happening here, but it's not an issue. It is a wideband, so it's gonna have a cone breakup somewhere here. But wow, plus 3 dB from this, extremely good. This is the best frequency response from all the drivers. Sound hits, the Chinese, it's not linear, but it's not as bad because it doesn't have any major issues. Break up something a bit lower or higher, so it's not totally flat, but it's not bad at all. The Dayton, good as well, very good. This little dip here is again very similar to one audio that we had and one of the Fatal Pros 25, yeah. So yeah, not bad at all. Cone breakup, 12K, all the way up to 20K and above. Very nice. Very, very nice response. Now, Fostex, as I mentioned, with the distortion as well, Fostex has this massive peak of distortion at about 2K, and this is, I want to say reason why, but I don't know the actual reason. This dip is in Fostex datasheet as well. So this is like the worst part of the frequency response. If you kind of ignore this little dip, all the way up to 6.7K, it's flat. It's really flat, similar to scan. You can see very, very flat, super flat, apart from this little dip. So is it audible? Probably no. But the thing is, if you're gonna have this driver in the dash and you're gonna have a reflection from the glass, if you kinda match this dip with that reflection, this is gonna have a massive hole in the frequency response. So yeah, not ideal, but the frequency response itself is very, very nice. The Peerless Dome, surprisingly, the lower frequencies, they're not as bad. There's no major issues. Stuff, it kind of starts to roll off, and after 4K, this is just something happening. So if you're gonna cross it quite low, like 2.5K or something, it's not bad. So this dome is kind of surprising because, again, as I mentioned, it costs £7 in the UK. It performs very nice, and the frequency response is not that bad. The only thing is that you have to cross it at 500 hertz, so you're gonna lose all of this. So basically, you have a little peak like this from 500 to 2K, very, very narrow bandwidth. But distortion wise and linearity is good. It's a good dome mid-range. Steg MS30. So this is very flat, very linear. It does dip down a little bit. And here you have the cone breakup, and it's all the way up to 9K, 19K, just because I believe it's an aluminum cone. So it's a metal cone, and it does have like a harsh breakup, which helps with the higher frequency extension, but it's quite big. But in general, very linear, a little something happening here at 2K, but no major issues. This is very similar to the Status. Status is slightly worse, but you can see it has a similar peak at higher frequencies as well. So this Status is kind of a wide band, but it isn't a three-way set. This is due to the phase plug. I did test it before as well, so it's nasty. It's not good. But all the way up to like 3.5K or so, it's not bad at all. It's kind of flattish. So if you use that as a mid-range, as I am using with a tweeter, it's good. If you would want to play it all the way up, because I did try this driver, and I'm talking now from my personal experience, I did play it all the way up, and I did EQ this in my car to be kind of flattish. The top end didn't sound as nice. Now I know why, because it's all of these nastiness happening. So yeah, the M528 dome. So you can see the frequency response as well. So this is crossed at 350 hertz. However, you can see that there's no response. Even if you cross it low, it doesn't play anything below 500. So the crossover that you put on it doesn't really matter. You can put 300, 400, 500, it doesn't really matter. And the response is, well, you can see it's not nice. And you saw this distortion as well. Distortion is one of the worst as well. So this mid-range is, meh, I don't know. Cartesian, very nice response, all the way up to 7K. Again, we have this little dip, which is similar to the Fostex, which is not as sharp. The Fostex, so this Cartesian and Fostex, you can see they're very similar response. Same dip, same roll off here, same peak, and something happening there. So this Fostex and the Cartesian, they're very similar from the frequency response. This dip, again, similar to One Audio as well. You can see just a different frequency. And the top end, just cone breakups and stuff happening. So this dip, it's not going to be audible at all, but not bad. Like all the way up to 10K, it's actually not bad, but very good. I'm surprised. However, this distortion kills this driver, but the frequency response is very, very nice. Alpine, again, as I mentioned, it's a mid-range, so it's not bad response all the way up to 6K or so. It's kind of controlled, no issues there. Here is just, we can ignore this because it's not going to play full range anyway. So nice, nice. The little baby RS75, again, doesn't play low at all. It kind of has a shelf going down, and this response is, it's not nice, I want to say, because it's not flat, it's a peak, it's a dip. It's not a major issue because, like, if I'm going to hold the line here at 90 dB, I have plus minus 5 dB. So you can EQ it, especially in a far field like this. This is in a far field. You can see this kind of goes away. So it's good. Yeah. But compared to all the others, it looks bad. And the Brax, did I mention Brax? I'm gonna go through again through Brax. Yeah, very, very linear, all the way up to 2.5K, and then kind of rolls off. No major issues with that. So from the frequency response, I picked the worst, mid 3.5, high fine, and the dome, which are these three. So you can see that high fine with all the wiggles and twiggles and whatever is happening, this mid 3.5, which is actually similar to the Dayton RS. So Dayton RS could be on the red list as well because they both look not nice. And that dome is not nice at all. So I picked these as the worst. So they got a red one. And the green one, La Voce, ScanSpeak, and Fostex. La Voce, ScanSpeak, and Fostex. And probably I should add like Cartesian as well because it's super flat, apart from these two peaks. But if we're gonna remove these two peaks, La Voce and ScanSpeak are the flattest, have the flattest response. One Audio is very close, but it has this and this. So it's close, but not as good as these two. These two are close to ideal as it can be. One thing that I want to show you is a real world scenario, because the far field measurements that I did are in the baffle that I did, and it does cut off like below 300 hertz, so I cannot show anything lower than that, and this is in a baffle. What I want to show you is the actual real world scenario. I put these drivers in my car in the driver's seat mid-range location. So this is my status driver that is in there and that I tuned it. This is no crossovers, no EQ, nothing. This is how it's like raw response in the dash. And I put all the other drivers, basically the ones that I could put in. So just for comparison, how they look like. So this, for example, Illusion, the one that we saw, it has a massive like drop in the near field response. We can see the same. Obviously, the level is lower because the sensitivity is lower compared to the status, but we have this drop off here. Now, another one that I want to show is La Voce. La Voce higher sensitivity, we have all this top end, and it's almost a full range driver with no EQ, plus minus 5 dB in the whole range, just like that. One Audio, very similar. Again, I'm probably going to remove the status and just compare La Voce, One Audio, and the other one that I want to add is the ScanSpeak, which is this. So you can see these three drivers. The ScanSpeak is not as sensitive in the lower range, but these three drivers are playing extremely similar all the way up to like almost 10K. You probably wouldn't hear a difference just in level between these three drivers, but the very top end is slightly different. So the nicest response is probably La Voce. You can see it plays flat all the way up to 20K. Now I did put some other drivers, however I don't want to show you because some of them didn't fit. So for example, the Fatal Pro, it did not fit properly, so it was a gap, so the lower frequencies are not correct. Like this Monster, it didn't fit as well, so I just took the measurement, but it's not a good measurement, so I'm not going to show you that. Brax did fit, and again it's a mid-range, so it does go down kind of as expected. Surprisingly, the Chinese drivers perform very nice, like all of these. All three Chinese drivers, no problem there. I did fit the smallest stag as well, and you can see this exactly the same as we saw in the near field response. the cone breakup of the metal cone. So the responses of all of them, if I'm gonna select all and I just remove the ones that didn't fit, but the response is very similar. So the main difference is at the very, very top end. But from all of these, again, as I mentioned, La Voce, Scan Speak, and One Audio plays the nicest. And you can see One Audio is, again, highest sensitivity, so it has the most level. The other thing that we can have a look is the on and off axis. So the only thing I did is 45 degrees. Plus and minus, so it doesn't really matter, so we're gonna have a look at the plus. And some of the drivers behave very nicely, some of them not so much. Like this Chinese driver, it's nice. The other Chinese is not so nice. You can see this is a massive hole at 10K, 45 degree, and it's not as linear. The other one, Chinese, again, this is not great at all, but all the way up to 8K, it's kind of okay. This one, it's not that bad. All the way up to 9K probably. It's kind of the same. And then there's big differences. So with these on-off axes, I don't know. I was looking at them and I couldn't really tell a big difference between drivers, because most drivers off axis are going to have a massive dip somewhere around this area. So this is, for example, Brax. Then we're going to have a look at One Audio, which if you tilt One Audio off axis 45 degrees on a baffle, it's flat all the way up to 14K, which is very, very cool. So I'm not going to show you every single one. What I would advise you to do is download this one, because I will leave it in the video description, so you will be able to download this document and have a look for yourself. You can go nitty gritty and check whatever you want. Obviously, the best on-off axis is for the small drivers. For example, SB10, it's identical on and off axis all the way up to 20K. It's just a level difference. So this exceptionally good off-axis response. SB10. Fostex has something similar as well. Very, very good, following each other. The smaller drivers perform much better off-axis, which is kind of expected. There is the same response up all the way up to 5K for the Dayton RS75, and then it kind of separates, but very controlled, very good. Cartesian, this one, I don't know, good up to 12, and then slight problems in both on and off axis. But yeah, again, I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't really know what you can see here. So I think I'm going to leave it for you to have a look for yourselves. Now, to summary. How long is this video? Oh my god, an hour 20 minutes. If you're still with me, congratulations. Let's summarize all of these drivers, what is good about them and what is bad. And again, just a reminder, this is my subjective evaluation, where I'm putting red for worse than average and green for better than average. It doesn't mean that red is a bad driver and green is a good driver, because some of these drivers are not supposed to be in a car. Like this Cartesian, it's not supposed to be in a car at all. SB10 is not supposed to be in a car. These Chinese drivers, I have absolutely no idea what they're designed for. Every driver is designed for a specific purpose. The designer of the speaker designed it for that, and we're just trying to throw stuff at the wall and just see what sticks. So for the final evaluation, I added a price. The price is basically whatever I could find online, and this is in US dollars. For some stuff, it was very difficult to find it because you cannot really buy it in the US, like this Cartesian. I haven't found a US price, so I found a Euro price and I converted it into the dollars. And this is for a pair of drivers, not for a single driver, but for pair drivers. So you can see this one, Sound Hits, the Chinese one, $14 for 2 drivers. Cheapest driver. I don't know if it can be a cheaper driver. These are the Chinese drivers, like these. $28 for a pair, $28. The most expensive ones that we have in this list is Brax ML3. So I found it 800. I don't know if it's 800, less or more in the US, but something like that. And Illusion Audio Carbon C3. 800, but now when I think about it, 800 is for a component set. So let's put 500 just for the mid-ranges themselves. The other expensive stuff is Steg MSS3, Steg MS30, very expensive. And the middle ground is One Audio, ScanSpeak, and Alpine 30MC. So let's summarize it very, very quickly. Let's try this. Dayton RS75, uh, tiny little baby. I don't know. Impulse is quite bad. It's not as sensitive. $70. Again, I would go for Fatal Pro for the same price. The only kind of good thing about for this driver is the off-axis, because it is a very, very small driver. So the off-axis response is going to be good. But apart from that, meh kind of driver. Alpine 30MC. The only like a bad thing about this driver is that it has high inductance and hence high distortion relatively to other drivers. It's a mid-range, it cannot be used as a wideband, and it costs 200. So compared to all the others, to me, this driver is not worth 200. Because for the same price, you can buy something much, much better. Cartesian, small driver, highest distortion, not as good impulse response, wideband for $90 a pair. I don't know, just the distortion that bugs me a bit. However, as Cartesian themselves put in my comment, this driver is not supposed to be in a car, so it was designed for a totally different purpose. Now, Steg MS30, good. The only thing that's relatively worse than others is the impulse. It's quite long, so it's not as snappy. And for 380, I personally think that is too expensive for the performance that you're getting. You can disagree with me, feel free, because you can see we have drivers that are much, much cheaper than that. So for 380, I think it's too expensive. But the driver itself is very good. It's just too expensive. Now, Fatal Pros, man, like 3FE25, you cannot say anything bad about this driver. For $50 a pair, the only bad thing about it, it's its physical size and that it looks kind of ugly. Other than that, it's a budget gem. And I do have a video about it where I did call it a budget gem because this is one of the best cheap drivers that you can find. There's literally frequency response, not as flat, but other than that, it's an amazing driver. Same with this one, neodymium magnet, easier to mount, takes up less space, it's just slightly more expensive, $74 for a pair, but again, super sensitive, not as linear, has some bumps in the impedance graph, have some bumps in the frequency response, but it's good. It's a very good driver. La Voce, I was eyeing this driver for quite a while. I wanted to try it out, and surprisingly, it's a very, very good driver. I cannot say anything bad about it. Impulse response, very good. Frequency response, flat. You can cross it quite low, 250, high sensitivity, 92, low inductance, and costing $80 for a pair. It's a very, very good deal. Like if I would have to choose between the Fatal Pro and the La Voce, because the difference is what, $6, I would go for La Voce. It has much better things going for it. One Audio. So One Audio is kinda price-wise competitor with a Scan 10F, because the price, you can see, it's very similar. Again, these are the prices that I found. Maybe they're a bit different, but what I found, they're very similar price, and performance is similar as well. ScanSpeak, if I'm comparing these two, ScanSpeak is a better made driver just because of the frequency response. We saw the same with the impedance graph, where One Audio had some wiggles in the impedance graphs and it has some little dips in the frequency response, whereas ScanSpeak is totally flat. However, One Audio is the most sensitive driver of them all. You can see it's plus 3 dB compared to Scan 10F. So for ultimate SQ, probably Scan. If you want a SQL system, louder, which has all the good stuff happening for it, One Audio, amazing driver. SB Acoustics, very good frequency response, linear, has a little bit of issues. The only downside is kind of sensitivity. It's not as sensitive, 84. But I'm not sure. I don't remember if it's a 4 ohm or an 8 ohm driver. But anyway, relative to others, sensitivity is quite low. But the price, $36 for a pair. It's a steal. Very, very good budget driver. Now, the surprising thing, these Chinese drivers. So this mid 3.5, which from all the other stuff looked very, very good. However, the frequency response is not as great, and it's quite more expensive compared to other Chinese drivers. So just because it costs more and the frequency response is not as great, I would say these two are very good drivers. $28 for a pair. One of them can be as a wideband. The other one doesn't reach like 16K, but it's almost a wideband. Very sensitive, 92, 93 dB. It's literally, you cannot say anything bad about them. The only concern that I might have is the consistency between the drivers, because stuff that's coming out from China might not be consistent batch to batch. Like if you're gonna take SB Acoustics SB10, probably they're gonna be 98% identical one to each other because of the consistency. These, I'm not sure, but for $30, I would just buy them. It's a very, very good deal for these drivers. And as you can saw, the distortion is not bad. There's literally nothing red, nothing bad for them. Not ideal, but for $30, I think they're great. Brax ML3, probably the driver that everybody thought is gonna be the best of the bunch, and I'm gonna crown it as the king. I'm not gonna crown it as the king. I'm not gonna say it's the best driver from the bunch. It does have quite a few things going for it that is very, very good. It's super linear. The impedance graph, super, super linear. Impulse response, amazing. It's a mid-range, it's not a wideband, so yeah, the frequency response is great as well. You can cross it low. Efficiency, 88, not bad, but not great. However, the price, I personally, and probably people are gonna hate me for that, I personally cannot justify such a high price tag for this driver. This is, again, my subjective opinion based on objective data. I cannot justify this price. Sound hits, Chinese driver, insensitive. It's, I don't know, it's not bad. For $14, $7 per driver, if you're on an extremely tight budget and you want to try something, yeah, go for it. Why not? But then double it and get these from China. These gonna perform slightly better than this, just because 85 dB sensitivity, I don't know. But for the price, you can see the only thing that I put red is sensitivity. It's not bad. Now, Scan 10F, as I mentioned, similar to One Audio, to me, this is a winner. My subjective opinion that based on objective data, this is the best performing driver of the bunch. The only thing that I can kind of nitpick is the sensitivity of 91, which 91 is a great sensitivity. But when you have One Audio, 94.5, like plus 3 dB sensitivity difference, this is the only thing. Apart from that, this is a winner. Slightly high on the price tag, but that's expected because it is a ScanSpeak. It is a legendary driver by a legendary company, so probably a lot of people expected that this is going to be a win as well. So I think that this, together with One Audio, these two are the winners. Slightly higher price tag, but the performance is exceptional. Chinese Hi-Fi, again, this is, I don't know. I would skip this driver probably. $51 frequency response is not that great. Quite high crossover point, quite low sensitivity. I want to say this is a pass. For this price, 50, I would take the Fatal Pro in a heartbeat. So this is a pass. Dayton PS95, good. Not great, not bad, good. The only downside is the sensitivity. It's very insensitive driver just because it is an 8 ohm driver. It has very low distortion. Everything else is kind of okay. The price is not bad, 74. However, if I would have to choose for the similar price tag, I would go for the La Voce because La Voce is 80, so it's very similar price tag. Much higher sensitivity and all the other stuff is better as well. But this Dayton, it's not a bad driver. Sensitivity is my issue. Another Chinese driver, Hi-Fine T35. It's an, I don't know, average driver, mid. It's not a wideband, it doesn't play that high, so it's an average driver for an average price. It's, I don't know, it's not bad. Cannot say anything bad about it, but again, I would choose the Fatal. Fostex is kind of a mixed bag because it does have a high resonance frequency, so you cannot play it low, 350 crossover frequency. It's kind of insensitive. It has, I put a frequency response as green because it is linear, but it has, if you remember, that nasty dip at about 2K, but that's the only issue that it has. The impulse response, if you remember, is the best one from all these drivers, and the distortion is great. So the only thing is that it's kind of insensitive, doesn't play low, but for the price, I think it's a very good driver. I think it's a great driver. However, me personally, $100, I would take the La Voce for 80. But it's just, I don't know, I love the La Voce driver. For the price especially. Now, this Dayton, the mini subwoofer. Like, I don't know. Again, mixed bag because objectively, it's not bad. It's super insensitive, like 80. So, distortion is the highest just because, again, correlation with the inductance. Inductance the highest, distortion the highest. $50. I wouldn't use it. I would keep this for a boombox because even for the price, there are much better drivers. Again, Fatal Pro as an example, same price. So keep this for boomboxes for the lower mid-range, maybe a little bit of bass. But yeah, that's a pass on this one. My Alpine status, I came up with a surprise because you don't see them being sold like in pairs, only as a three-way kit. So I just kind of assume because the whole three-way is $1,000. So I assume 350. There's nothing really bad about it. The impulse is one of the worst. Frequency response is not that great, but as a mid, it's not that bad. I would say it's cost too much. For the performance that you get from this driver, it's too expensive. Similar to, in my opinion, Steg 380. So yeah, like if you're comparing the Alpine with Steg, because it is kind of a similar price tag, both of them look kind of the same, have one of the worst impulses, but all the other stuff is very similar. Frequency crossover 300, 91 sensitivity 90, 150 fs, this is a bit lower. Like, they're very similar drivers, and in my opinion, both of them are overpriced. The only good thing for the Alpine is that it looks, to me personally, the best of the bunch. And probably this price tag comes, you're basically paying for how it looks like. But for the performance, I think it's too expensive. Now, the Fatal Pro 4FE42. Yes, the impedance is not linear. The frequency response is not as linear as we would want. However, this driver is super sensitive and it has the lowest distortion of all of these drivers. For $120 for a 4-inch driver, if you can fit it, it's, to me, this is a solid second place after the ScanSpeak and One Audio, or maybe a third one. Like, if I would have to give places, I want to say ScanSpeak first, One Audio second, La Voce third, and this Fatal Pro with FE25 and 22 probably after that. This is, as I mentioned, I'm going to repeat it myself again, the lowest distortion driver that costs $60 per driver. 124 a pair. It is a steal. It's half the price of the Scan and One Audio. So this is on the top of the list. It's a very, very good driver. The only bad thing again is just it looks a bit ugly because all Faithful Pros compared to all the beauties like Brax ML, it's a beauty. Alpine is a beauty. These Stegs, they look amazing. This, bleh. But if you don't care about that, it's a great, great driver. Now, Steg MSS3. I really cannot say anything bad about this driver. Apart from, yeah, it is a mid, it's not a wideband, but it is a 4-inch. So we saw from the linearity from the impedance and the frequency, it's not as smooth as the Scans Peak, but I really cannot say anything bad about this driver. The only bad thing about this driver is the price. 500 USD, or like, I don't know how much it's in the UK, like 350 or 400 pounds. In my personal opinion, it's overpriced for the performance that you're getting. It does look good though, so if you like how it looks like, if you like the brand name, it's a good driver. But for me, it's slightly overpriced. Now, this Peerless Dome mid-range, it is of a budget gem. So again, I was trying to find the price for it because in the UK, I saw it for £7, £8, £10. In the US, $20 per driver. So as a mid-range driver, Dome mid-range, it's good. It has low distortion. It is quite sensitive. The only downside is the bandwidth. It doesn't play high, it doesn't play low. But that's like with all the mid-ranges, Dome mid-ranges. When I tested the Morel mid-range, it was kind of the same issue. I had to cross at like 450 hertz. It didn't play high. So if you have a low playing tweeter and you want that Dome dispersion and low distortion, yeah, for the price, especially in the UK, it's a very, very good mid-range driver, Dome mid-range driver. I really cannot say anything bad about it. Now, this is the complete opposite. This is, in my opinion, bad in most regards. The only kind of good thing is the impulse, but frequency response is one of the worst. Distortion is one of the worst, and these are the main things that we kind of care about. So this one would be a hard pass. And Illusion Audio, which is the newcomer. Again, I don't have any data for the FS, QTS, and LE, but you can cross it quite low, 250. Distortion is not bad. Impulse is great. Sensitivity is much lower than I would want to see. So it's very unsensitive driver. That's probably the only kind of downside to it, apart from the price. Price, in my opinion, again, it's way overpriced. You could get good or better performance for much less, but it looks very, very cool. Again, I'm going to do a full unboxing and review video about this, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, insensitive and super, super expensive. So this is it. All the measurements, impedance graphs, distortion measurements, frequency responses, and everything. This project took actually much longer than I thought that it's gonna take. I was talking about round two with all the other drivers, but now I am not sure if I want to do it again because it is a lot of work. I did satisfy my own curiosity. As always, I hope that this was useful for some. As a reminder, I'm gonna upload this file and I'm gonna upload the frequency response and the distortion measurements and everything into my Google Drive, and I'm gonna leave the links under the video so you can download it for yourself and check all the data. One thing that I didn't touch is the waterfall, just because I literally didn't find anything there. To me, all the drivers look identical. The only thing that I found is the Alpine Status has this little kind of trail tail at 12-13K. That's the only thing. All the other drivers to me look identically good. I couldn't find any issues. That's why I didn't really touch it. Okay, that's it. I need to rest. You need to rest. Download this file, poke around in it, and please, please, please comment, because I want to know what you think about this video, about this test, and especially about these drivers. Do you agree with me with my conclusions in this summary? Do you don't agree? Please feel free to disagree and tell me something else, because I'm very interested in what you think about this as well. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.